welcome back to CityLine. With me, I have two, oh my gosh, extremely talented individuals that are here to talk about the Majestic Lions of Wright Park. Please join me in welcoming Tacoma's own artist, Lynn Di Nino. Hello, Lynn, welcome.
Thanks, happy to be here.
Good to have you here. And art historian, Michael Sullivan. Hello, Michael, welcome to CityLine.
Hi, Amanda.
Good to have you both here. Okay, so recently the Majestic Lions at the entrance to Wright Park were vandalized. And I want all of our audience to lean in very closely when I say this and get a good view of this and hear this. I want to emphasize that this occurred in late April before any of the peaceful protests happened downtown. So this vandalism is not a part of the peace protests. This happened in April, and we're going to put it in that category because we know that our Tacomans love Wright Park. So Michael, I don't know if you heard me scream all the way from my house that morning, but how did you learn about the vandalism and what was your reaction?
Well, I learned from Laura Jensen, the poet here in town, who has a habit of walking through the park early in the morning, and she picked up the broken pieces of the nose that morning and did a little message, knowing probably that I'd be like you, in the sense that they were vandalized. So
yeah, it was I have to say, sheltering in a home and staying at home during COVID, sometimes time gets away from you and experiences do, but I very clearly remember that morning that I got on Facebook and there it was. So Lynn, how did you come to be the person restoring the lions? And thank goodness you are.
Well, thanks. I didn't know about it until I looked on Facebook myself because R.R. Anderson called my attention to it. And he said, "Where's the nose doctor?" And he was referring to me that way because he remembered my working on another sculpture.
Ah, yes. Okay, so history repeats itself with your talent. So I had Metro Parks on about a month and a half ago. I had Phaedra on, and she was talking about that they are facing a projected 13 million revenue shortfall through the summer, Lynn. So how are they able to cover the costs of your talent to restore the Lions with these financial challenges? Because I'm going to say it once more in case people forget, art is not free. So Lynn, how are we paying you?
Well, it turns out that posting by Michael got the attention of a lot of local people that said we can contribute to hiring her. So Michael organized that group, and they're paying me to do the work.
Oh, boy, if that isn't Tacoma, I don't know what is. It makes me smile. So Michael, I'm sure you were just elated when you got that news. So this may seem like for you being a historian an obvious question, but for maybe some of our viewers, not so much. So why do these artworks matter so much that you were willing to step forward and handle all those details in terms of restoring them?
Well, they just have a great story, Wright Park is like our living room for the whole community. It's got, it's a beautiful park with, I don't know how many 100 different kinds of trees in it, but it also has kind of become a place where there's a cannon from the Spanish-American War and a bust of Heinrich Ibsen and, the conservatory. I mean, it's just, there's something there for everyone. The first time I walked through the park, and here's a bunch of kids, probably from nearby, playing basketball, and watching them are, a group of seniors in all white, watching the basketball players. And a few minutes later, you go back, and there's a bunch of kids standing around the lawn bowling green with basketballs under their arm, watching the seniors lawn bowling. I mean, it's just such a intimate sort of insight into the city. The backstory of the lions, like the other statuary in the park, largely goes back to a character named Clinton Ferry, who was a nephew of the first governor of the state. And kind of a bittersweet story in his life. He was getting on in years. His first wife had passed away, and he met a young woman down in San Francisco, and he decided he was of some wealth, and he decided to take her off to the great exposition in Paris and do the kind of grand tour in Europe. And by then he had developed a kind of an interest in the fine arts, and was going to, his young bride was going to kind of get to tour Europe and look at the great artworks of Europe. And so he went out spending a lot of time looking at museums. She took up learning the French language and then took off with her French language teacher. So poor Clinton ended up coming back home, divorcing her, which was scandalous in those days, and then going back to Europe and starting to accumulate and buy replicas, copies, and some original artwork, and sending it back to Tacoma with the idea that someday we would have a museum here. And indeed, that's what happened. This all happening in the early 1890s. And then by about 1893 or so, we built this grand stone courthouse, which is gone now. And the Ferry Museum then was housed in the upper floor of the courthouse. And so a lot of the smaller sculptures, copies of the Venus de Milo and stuff, ended up in the Ferry Museum. But the larger pieces ended up going into the park. They were meant to be outdoors. Anyway, in those days, the Yakima Avenue went through the park, and the two lions that we're talking about were used as kind of these majestic guardians of the entrance to the park on Yakima Avenue coming from the south. And so and if you think about it for a second, that means those sculptures are, 130 years old. So they just mean something. I mean, we're not a young city, and they are emblematic of our early days of the fine arts in Tacoma.
They absolutely are, and what a great history lesson. I love that. Didn't know that there was a road through the park. So Lynn, let's pick up on the story. So Laura Jensen picks up the pieces. Thank you, Laura Jensen. And she gives them to Metro Parks. Lynn, did those pieces help you? And were you able to just simply glue them back on?
Well, no, I guess I could have glued them on, but one of the noses was in about 60 pieces. So that would have been pretty labor intensive to put it together. And it's not as strong as putting new concrete on. But they did help me because the other nose was pretty much intact, and I could temporarily glue it on, take its picture, remove it, and start over. But that gave me a template.
So, now you have another career doing nose jobs.
No more careers.
No more careers. But Lynn, this is not your first time restoring statues from the Wright Park collection. Tell us about the fisherman's daughter that graces the pond and how you were able to restore part of the 2005 park bond. It made front page news when the contractor unearthed it and unearthed the head from the pond. How challenging was that?
Well, it reminded me of being a detective. So I guess the park told the contractor, when you dredge that lake, look for these body parts, and the contractor found them. So the sculpture, the head, part of the arms, I believe part of a leg, were brought to my studio. And it was pretty easy to figure out how to get the arm together, and the leg, it was just missing, like a puzzle piece. But the head was more challenging. I had to ask the park for some original photographs because it seemed like her head shouldn't be down like that, but it turned out that's exactly how it fit.
Wow, that is impressive. And once again, reason why you should never throw anything away, because you may need it, a picture of the statue. So Michael, one of my last questions in terms of our time together is, were you surprised at the number of community members who responded to your post offering to support a GoFundMe to cover the restoration costs?
No, I knew right away as soon as it got out in social media that it meant something. I mean, the reaction was pretty positive. And, you know, we didn't go through a formal GoFundMe or Kickstarter campaign. I just got messaged, and small and big amounts. And, you know, Lynn really donated most of her time. If we went to an art conservator and tried to do this, and I mean, we worked on the restoration of the Spanish Steps and the outside of the Elks building, which are also cast stone, marble aggregate type of material. So this can be the expensive path, or it can be the community let's heal ourselves path, which just, yeah, you don't measure it in money. It's just something that is us, you know.
So Lynn, you have your fingerprints all over all of the historic sites here of Tacoma.
Well, just a few.
Just a few. Michael, when you think about that precious historic assets like the Wright Park statues, I imagine as a historian that you're pretty particular about who you would entrust to return them to their glory. And I'm sure you join me in knowing how fortunate we are to have artists of Lynn's caliber living in our community and helping us.
You know, the capacity of our arts community, our homegrown arts community, because of SODA and migration of creative people into our city, I don't think we fully understand how big a part of it is, of our character and our economy and just our well-being, and our capacity to fix ourselves and get better. It's where the arts and our cultural community has just become a essential part of Tacoma.
It is, and I think it's prophetic given the times we're in, that so much restoration is happening on the noses of our lions in terms of racial restoration. We are putting everything back together and trying to make it right here in Tacoma. Lynn Di Nino, Michael Sullivan, thank you so much for being here today. Lynn, thank you for your precious heart and those hands that made everything right. Michael, thank you for that fabulous heart-mind connection that keeps the good parts of our history going and also helping us learn from the parts that are not so good. I loved having both of you on here, and please take care of yourselves.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vanda.
My pleasure. We have much more to come on CityLine, so don't go away. We'll be right back after this quick break.